to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Chisel.
Here.
Bill Richards.
Here.
Carlson. Here. Luce.
Here.
Bergen.
Here.
Hadley.
Here.
Johnson's absent.
Oh. Approval of the agenda.
I motion to approve the agenda. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Bill Richards.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Bergen.
Aye.
Chisel.
Aye.
And Carlson.
Aye.
Approved. Public comment. Tonight we have the annual report and update from the Park and Recreation. Andy?
I wasn't expecting this type of a turnout.
We love our parks.
You're so popular, Amy. Oh, you Amy.
All right, thank you. So, those of us that enjoy winter activities are getting our wish today. In my line of work, we want winter now and spring come April. Contrary to what the street department might think, we're hoping for a lot of snow here with enough accumulation to get the new cross-country trail groomer out in the morning. And on the other hand, I could note that spring is coming because the campground opens in 52 days. So I think you got a lot of the report and the information here over the weekend. You probably had a chance to go through some of it. But as you can see, we've gone in a lot of different directions over the past year, and with all the discussions and planning going on around town right now, I anticipate we'll probably be going in a lot of different directions next year as well. These reports are fairly detailed. I hope you have a chance to look them over. They will be helpful in our upcoming long-range planning with the Park and Rec Board and with the Council here soon. I wanted to touch on three things. Reconstruction continues on Doug Road. We are beginning to look at what restoration will look like along that stretch of trail following the reconstruction. There's two things that are clear. Doug Road is the most popular section of trail in the trail system, and Doug Road is probably the most fragile area in the park system from an environmental standpoint. So we're working to try and navigate that, knowing full well that FEMA's calling the shots when it all comes down to it as well. We're lucky to have some local plant experts that are volunteering to help us with some of that planning right now as we work through it. We have a great new activity coming up in the green sheet that I've handed you. It's called the Great Inflate and Pancake Breakfast. We will be setting up inflatable slides, obstacle courses, bouncy houses, and toddlers games in the high school gym on February 24th. And we've partnered with the group that knows how to make pancakes, the Decorah Lions Club, to serve breakfast or lunch that day. The Lions Club has made a financial pledge over 5 years to support the purchasing of new trees in the parks to replace the ash trees that are coming out. The third thing is the dog park. Decorah is going to have a dog park. As most of you know, volunteers have been working and have spearheaded an effort to put a dog park on city property between Walmart and the wastewater plant along Old Stage Road and the Freeport Trail. Although a dog park probably wasn't the highest priority on the park board wish list, these volunteers have raised 100% of the money needed to get it ready to be open and have basically made it happen. The site has already been leveled, worked, and seeded down, and a contractor has been hired to install the chain link fence in late May or early June, and we anticipate opening this coming summer. And then before I wrap up, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the community for the ongoing support. From volunteer and financial support to understanding the impact of service, we're lucky to live and work in this community. It's fun to work with people and groups that support the things they are passionate about, and I'd also like to thank the staff that I work with that are fun to come to work with every day. So that's that. If you got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks for all the information.
You betcha.
I'll make a I'm not going to let you go that quick. I will make a comment. I really urge you to look at all the data that's in here. I have gone through it and checked it. His staff has done a very nice job of doing comparisons to other years as well. And I know that they are always looking out to see what are the needs, what are the hot things coming up, and they try to incorporate those in the programs that they give. It's a challenge. We talked a little about that, the challenge of meeting those needs, both with how many kids we have that are partaking or are in the community, all the various activities that are going on in the community as well. But his staff has done a really good job of doing a lot of data collection on what they do, and I encourage everybody to just take some time and sit down and read it. I appreciate your work and your guidance with staff that you have.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Andy.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak in front of the council on any matters that are not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go on to the consent agenda. Chad, you want to read that, please?
Item A, minutes of the January 12, January 15, and January 16, 2018 meeting minutes. Item B, claims. Item C, partial pay estimate number 4, Highway 9 and 52 water sewer extension in the amount of $2,267.68. Item D, partial pay estimate number 2, Doug Road Trail repair in the amount of $56,194.85. Item E, renewal Class E liquor license for Fairway, including Class B wine and Class C beer privileges. Item F, renewal Class C liquor license for Oneota Lanes, including Sunday sales. Item G, renewals for special Class C beer wine license for Java John's, including Class B wine, outdoor service area, and Sunday sales privileges. Item H, renewal Class C beer wine permit for Mabes, including Sunday sales. Item I, Resolution 2864, setting a date for the proposed fiscal 19 budget of March 5th, 2018 at 5:45 p.m. And item J, accepting the fiscal 17 audit report.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Oh, I heard one on one side.
No,
one
Richard.
on the other.
Is there Andy?
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Carlson?
Roll call. Shoot. I don't know.
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Chisel?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Good job.
6, consider ordinance 1214, amending ordinance 1170, designating an area of Decorah, Iowa as the 2014 Decorah Housing Urban Revitalization Area. This is the third and final reading. Do you have background on that, Chad?
Just to review, that this is an amendment and a restatement for the city's residential housing abatement program. And just to cover that again, this lifts the cap, and so any residential construction, new improvements are eligible with no limit. And it's for 100% of the actual value added by the improvements for a period of 5 years. There's also no sunset on this particular amendment. And this is the third and final reading.
Okay.
But the SOP would be a yearly analysis to decide whether to continue.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll motion to approve ordinance 1214. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
Chisel?
No.
Carlson?
No.
Can you, what's the final vote on that then?
4-2.
4-2, so it
Thank you.
passes.
Number 7, consider a letter of engagement with Ahlers and Cooney attorneys for legal counsel in relation to electric and telecommunication utilities. Can I speak on that, Chad, please?
Yes, so this is an item put forth by the City Attorney's Office, John Anderson, and myself, to ask the council to authorize a letter of engagement with Ahlers and Cooney for the services that we outlined there in the agenda item for special counsel, consultation on electric and telecommunications utilities. As the council continues to discuss these two items, there are just areas of expertise that we feel we need to tap into, and Ahlers and Cooney can do that for us. So we're asking the council to approve that letter of engagement. I've recommended in the background notes a not to exceed amount of $15,000. Certainly that amount would be at council discretion if the council would choose to implement any amount. The letter itself does not engage a specific dollar amount.
And you did meet with them?
It's been a couple weeks
Okay.
now, maybe last
Okay.
Thursday, yeah.
So if we were to approve this moving forward, how would the decision process work on whether we choose to utilize their services or not?
Well, they would be a resource that John and I could tap into as needed.
Okay.
If you, as council, decided you wanted to use them in more depth for the municipalization of the electric utility, that would be a conversation you'd have to engage them. But at this time, just to prepare background information and doing our own staff level research, we need that level of expertise.
Chad, can you speak to how this firm was chosen?
Based on their knowledge in the telecommunications field and expertise, it's a larger firm, and their knowledge in the electric field as well. But we started using them on the telecommunications side. They had walked us through that entire process, including the referendum.
I feel like we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves here. Maybe we do a referendum first to see if there's even a need to engage with this firm, possibly spending up to $15,000 we might not need to spend.
So if there's a different amount that you feel comfortable with. I mean, we've already, again, we tapped into them for the telecommunications side through the referendum. When we met with them last Thursday, there were several questions that the Telecommunications Board had been asking that we needed that level of expertise. And they were able to provide that for us.
Are some of the questions that you've been talking about, how do you implement that in the current setup that we have? I mean, what type of questions did you kind of approach them with when you went down to talk?
Right, on the telecommunications side, it was a lot of what is their authority? What authority has been granted, either by the referendum or by the ordinance that the council approved to seat that board? There was some controlling language in there in the ordinance that was unclear to us as to exactly what authority that board had or has. So we were able to discuss that through. As that board, the Telecommunications Board, the Fiber Utility Board, prepares a business plan and prepares to present information to the council about seeking funding, whether it be revenue bonds or GO bonds or other fundraising. What are the legal requirements surrounding restrictions on those funds or obligations of those funds? Those are the types of questions we've been getting into with them. And similar questions are coming up now on the electric utility side, especially with the referendum. And the background notes that I sent you earlier today address some of those questions.
And would this be, well, it's not to exceed, but you would be consulting them when you would have a question?
Or the council would so direct me to
Okay.
conduct additional research, but they're a resource for us.
Okay.
Us being myself, my office, and the city attorney's office.
So taking the amount suggested of 15 and dividing by the rate, it came out in my math to a little over 42 hours. Is there an expectation that's plenty on the far side to, or would you come again and ask for more authorization for more funding to.
I put the cap in there to try to address perhaps some comfort level for the council, so it's not just an open checkbook, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, that's my recommendation. You need to be comfortable with that amount, so suggest something else if you need to. But I would look at either a 25-75 or a 60-40 split between telecommunications and electric utility, depending on council's action or desire to move forward with the electric utility discussions.
Chad, can you say those numbers again? Because that was my question.
Again, those are just my numbers, right? But somewhere in a 25-75 up to a 60-40 split, heavy on the electric side would be my guess at this point.
Could we have it be more heavy on the telecommunications side since we've already passed the referendum there?
Yeah, and again, I'm just guessing where, conversations are going. Most of the legwork on the fiber side has been done, unless we get into how are we going to raise some money, whether it be geo bonds or revenue bonds or whatever, then that's going to take a fair amount more. That will also engage a financial advisor as well. A financial advisor is going to have to be comfortable with whatever business plan or feasibility study analysis is done so that they can go sell the bonds, and there's going to be underwriting that goes with that as well.
I feel a more pressing need and desire to have you have access to this type of counsel for the telecommunications and fiber utility. It seems like these things are in front of us in the next minute. And in terms of municipal electricity, we're still, in another fact-finding presentation yet tonight. I also think you've done a good job over the last weeks, Chad, sharing repeatedly the questions that you have on your table about the fiber telecommunications utility. And so I feel more prepared to say, yeah, let's get some support in that area. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with the $15,000 tonight and the scope being brought in so intensively to the electric utility discussion yet.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I'd like to separate the two and more focus on the telecommunications as well before we get into legal consulting for the electric.
If you have questions, like, let's say you have questions coming up, just how do you get the money raised in order to pay for some of this stuff? When you're looking at the amounts on both ends, that's a lot of money. Where can the staff get information that might even go prior to the referendum? You've got to have, how's it going to be paid for? Well, how it's going to be paid for. How does that affect? What's going to be involved in that? Is it a hiring of staff? Those type of questions are the things that, I think of, that I wouldn't even know where to find out those kind of answers. So I don't know, 15,000 sounds like a lot, but to be able to have a resource that you can, ask, and whether there's permission to do so every time, I guess I just don't have all the answers, and I'm not sure the staff has all the answers. But
I just feel like we're in two different places for both of these subjects, and I don't know if we're even going to move forward with the electric, so I think if we got a referendum and some numbers back to see if we can gauge public interest, to see if it's worth spending more money on that.
Okay.
If there's not support, I don't understand why we would spend that much money to move forward.
Well, we can work with staff on what questions are being asked and when. So, this is simply authorizing the ability to spend that. But, as far as when we're engaging them, I would like to have, a better understanding of exactly what questions are going to be brought to them at what time, so we can, as a council and as a city staff, kind of be on the same page and utilizing the resources as efficient as we can, versus, one party speaking to them at one point and then having to ask them the same questions later or something like that. So.
Right. And you could certainly, to address Councilperson Carlson's concerns, take a little more accounting on our end, but we could certainly do it in terms of, we'll set a dollar amount for telecommunications and set a dollar amount for electric utility discussions if you want to do that. And just set those thresholds wherever you're comfortable, and then have us come back and ask for more if we think we need to. And that's a way to address it. Again, the letter is just a simple letter of engagement. The letter doesn't set the dollar amounts. That's what I'm asking you to consider.
And if we don't spend it, we don't spend it.
Yeah, it's not to exceed amount. It's
Yeah.
not that you have to spend that money.
It's for you to be able to act when we need to, when
That's right.
questions arise.
I think with the idea of a possible referendum coming sometime, it might make sense to approve fundage to be able to have the resource to get the language in the various parts we want on a referendum, if it happens, correct. So I guess I'm in favor of some money to be allocated toward this letter of engagement.
We've already utilized this firm's services for those types of things, the ordinance, the referendum language, the ballot language, and the formation for the fiber side. If that's where you're going to need that level of expertise on the electric side as well.
And was this $15,000 based on experience with working with them to establish that same language last time?
No. No, I think last time the agreement was not to exceed $5,000.
Any comment? Or
John,
thoughts?
what did, you came back and it sounded like there was a lot of data that was thrown at you within a short period of time.
It's a big issue, and it's more complicated than telecommunications because you have IUB that's involved as well. And also, there isn't a whole lot of precedent in the state of Iowa on how to do this. During the presentation before, they mentioned the 2008 attempt, and I think there was one other one in the last 20 years. It's a unique area of law. It's extremely specialized, and I think it's a very big issue that's hard to appreciate on the little information that we have. And it's important for the city to have its own specialized counsel to give the city their own independent advice and for the city to do its own due diligence, even if it's the basic issue of the referendum. What's the language we're using? What's the timing of that referendum? That's important stuff, and the city needs somebody like the firm we're recommending to provide that. And at some point, it'd be good for the city council, if they decide to proceed with this, to talk with that council. When, that's open to debate, and when you hold the referendum, that's going to be your decision. But you want to go into it with your eyes wide open. And if you're looking at the long game, it's good to get some of these issues identified earlier rather than later, if possible. There's going to be issues you can't identify, that are going to come up later. But I think it's prudent to use this firm early on. How much we use them, it's hard to say. One question sometimes leads to another, and there's a lot of I say chicken and the egg scenarios. What do you do first? Well, what do and what steps do you take? And some of these, there's no perfect answer, but you got to know, well, these are the possible scenarios. And so whatever level you feel is comfortable as far as an amount, I would recommend you do that and give the staff a little bit of leeway in communicating with them and conveying whatever your questions are as well.
Did they help write the referendum for the telecommunications utility?
They did. Yeah.
Speaking of the long game, have they presented before in front of the IUB?
Well, I know they practice in front of the IUB. I don't know that they were involved in the 2008 proceedings. But they do municipal utility laws, my understanding.
What's the council's?
I would move for approval of a letter of engagement with Ahlers and Cooney for the public utilities work that we're doing in a not to exceed amount of $15,000.
Second.
Further discussion?
And Randy, that's to include for electric and telecommunications?
Yes.
And I'm not hearing it being said that if we decided to pursue municipal electric utility, that this firm would be take us all the way through the IUB process. I'm hearing we're using them as a consultation right now to get the steps in a row. Am I hearing correctly?
That's the way I'd like to present it, yes. You decide when you go all the way who you want to represent you at that time.
Thank you.
Roll call?
Chisel?
Aye.
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Carlson?
No.
Luce?
Aye?
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
5 to 1.
5 to 1.
Okay, number 8, consider a professional service agreement with McClure Engineering Company for a sidewalk planning study not to exceed $16,750. Chad?
This is a planning study that has been discussed at the planning and zoning level for quite some time as we consider sidewalks, especially in the, Bruning residential subdivision on the city's west side. The Planning and Zoning Commission believes that hiring an outside firm will aid in fresh ideas and a different approach to how we deal with sidewalks in that area. It's a pretty complex subdivision, has topography issues and site amenity issues that will need to be overcome. And so with their backing, I recommend that the council consider hiring McClure Engineering for sidewalk feasibility study and design concepts in the Bruning subdivision at not to exceed $16,750.
I'll make a motion for approval of a professional services agreement with McClure Engineering.
Motion's on the table.
Before we have a second or vote, I just have a question.
Sure.
In the quote, it looked to me that Exhibit B, preliminary option of probable cost, was not included. I was just wondering why.
I'm sorry, I have to look at it here and see.
And I noted that to be contrary to what was stated earlier in the same document, and so had the same clarifying question.
So what page is that again, Ross?
On the second page of the quote,
1.01, number 3.
well, yeah, or in the box where the signature line is. On Exhibit B, it says preliminary option of probable costs. It's X'd not included, but yet at the beginning of the document, it says that that costs would be included, so I just wanted to...
So you're looking at Exhibit B on the back page.
Correct.
Where it says not included, but then you're seeing it as included on the front page?
Correct.
Yeah, that should be included. That would be a key component of the work, so.
Yeah, hence my question.
So I'll initial that and/or get a corrected copy before we have the mayor sign it.
I'd second as long as we have that.
Yeah, good catch.
And is this expense recoverable through the doing of the project in future assessments or not?
Well, so it depends on if the project is assessed, what that looks like, how far you go through the process, right?
So it's possibly recoverable.
Yeah. I don't know how much you... Yeah, we can look at that as we talk about assessments.
Or it might be good the city part of the project.
Right, could be that too.
Gotcha.
In the sidewalk policy that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended, and I think the street committee looked at here a couple weeks ago, there are some different ideas on assessment costs, if they're even assessed, right?
Right.
I think we would look at whether this project is assessed or done in some other fashion as some information we'd like to glean from this study.
What would
some of those other options be, Chad, for finance? I mean, through the sidewalk fund, or?
Right, sidewalk fund, forgivable loans, city just pay for it. I mean, there'd be a myriad of things that could be looked at.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Can I ask one more question, Ryan?
Who seconded that? I'm sorry, Hadley?
Loose?
Ross.
Oh, Ross. Yeah, I asked the question.
In the preparing of design concepts, in addition to what's included in their proposal, will that include considerations of both current sidewalk usage and future, including where children are frequenting the streets instead of sidewalks, bus routes, things that we've discussed, either planning and zoning and city?
Right, yeah, bus routes was a key one that came up during planning and zoning, so
Yep.
it needs to be part of that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, roll call.
All right, so we have a motion by Carlson, second by Hadley, right?
Hadley, yep.
Carlson?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
Chisel?
Aye.
Bell Richard?
No.
Luce?
Aye.
5-1.
5-1.
9, consider professional service agreement with McClure Engineering Company for corridor planning study not to exceed $35,000. Can you get the background on that, please, Chad?
So similar conversations, expanding even maybe beyond the Planning and Zoning Commission to include some side comments about future growth and development in the Highland Place subdivision, just off of Locust Road, otherwise known as the Finold Addition or the Venium area. As we look at a potential 30-lot subdivision coming this spring, future plans for development by Ase Hagen, and some real needs for transportation review up there, it's been suggested that I consider the same firm for planning studies in that area, in that corridor. And so I present this for McClure Engineering Company at a cost not to exceed $35,000 for a corridor development study in that area.
There has not been a study in that area prior?
None that I'm aware of at this level.
They did talk about transportation concerns too, and there's only, what, one road going out?
And right now that area serves 80 acres more or less, undeveloped, with one way in and one way out. And I think from a planning perspective, there's some issues there that need to be looked at before we get too many more subdivisions coming along.
I'd like to see the area studied shifting more south toward town. You know, assuming that the document that they're providing is truly the scope. I'd rather see it go more toward town, toward the, oh, never mind. I see now that college, never mind.
Yeah, you want it down
I want it,
yeah.
yeah, I see it now.
Okay.
I just didn't scroll far enough.
And that's the area that we'd anticipate future growth, I guess, in the easiest, that would be the low-hanging fruit for future growth,
And I think
best that we can tell.
I think that's why we have the one subdivision with 30 lots that'll be coming for a preliminary plat this month to planning and zoning, and why Ase Hagen's already looking at some development of their own through 2018. It has all the water and sewer, just has transportation issues.
And again, I guess the pricing would be the other thing. If we're spending this much money, I'd want them to put the probable costs in
Yeah, and I was, yeah.
of their designs, because
Yep.
it's a
Yes,
big
and
part of that rate.
I'll correct that one out too.
And this looks like the border runs Locust Road. Would that take into considerations the fiscal 19 plans to start working in that area?
So while I would expect some comments on Locust Road, I think Locust Road is probably primarily its own project.
Okay.
Because this is going to be more about ingress and egress into this area, into this subdivision.
No, but as they look at the whole thing, I would hope that they would look at the load capacity of it anyway.
This is also, you know, that ingress and egress is more north on Locust Road, which is less of the problem area that the Locust Road project will be addressing.
I believe we need a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further questions? Roll call.
Chisholm?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Carlson?
Aye.
Motion passes. Consider board and commission appointments. We've got an appointment to Human Rights Commission. It's a reappointment for Melissa Cook and an appointment for Lisa Scott. And I'm assuming all the proper documentation is in for both of those?
Yes.
I'd move those appointments.
I'd second them.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Luce?
Aye.
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Chisholm?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Carlson?
Aye.
TIF and LMI Commission, reappointment Pat Running for Habitat for Humanity, and a reappointment for Jan Hike as mayor appointee.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Or roll call?
Roll call.
Chisholm?
Aye.
Luce?
Give me a
Aye.
number here.
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Carlson?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
And
Okay.
thank you to all of them for serving.
Yes,
Yes.
very much so. Okay, city manager and department head.
Okay, the only thing I have to report is that I will be bringing an action item at the next meeting regarding the dry run box culvert. Bids were received from the DOT in the last week. There were 5 bids, and the apparent low bid is Wix Construction. And so I'll bring a full report and action item on that at the February 19 meeting for that project. If we need to have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting or a Street Committee meeting to discuss that in more detail, let's talk about that between now and the next meeting. Otherwise, that's all I have. Thank you.
Department heads?
Really?
Park Board meets Thursday this week,
Pardon?
5 p.m. Park Board meets this Thursday, 7 p.m.
Okay. Randy?
I have nothing this evening, just thank you to the Budget Committee for meeting prior to this meeting for our audit, which we're in good shape.
Nothing for
Randy?
me.
There is a utility meeting after the Alliant presentation. There'll be a Q&A with the Counsel and Decorah Power. So I encourage everyone to stick around if they'd like to hear that. There will not be a public Q&A, but I encourage both parties, Alliant and Decorah Power, to stick around and answer any questions for the general public if they would.
Nothing here.
I noticed Kevin's not here, but I just want to thank the street department for getting the roads done so we can all attend.
Okay. So how's Luther doing?
Doing well. Supposed to start back up this Thursday, so y'all have been warned.
I'll go fast for this year. Okay, we're going to take just a short break, and then Alliant Energy will be providing their report, about half an hour, 45 minutes or so. So we will come back in 5 minutes.